It's been vilified, worshipped, criminalized, immortalized in film, literature, and song, and praised for its powers. It's cannabis, or more popularly known as marijuana. To that litany of bad and good, you can now add big business, big legalized business. With more and more states giving the nod to medical and recreational marijuana, it was only a matter of time before Wall Street got into the act. Keeping track of the business side of legalized marijuana is the job of Chris Walsh, editorial director of the online news source Marijuana Business Daily, which touts itself as the most trusted cannabusiness news source since 2011. Walsh says that despite the fairly lackadaisical attitude of some European countries toward the use of pot, the U.S. is actually the country on the cutting edge of the business of marijuana.
Canada has legalized medical marijuana at the federal level, and some other countries have as well, but the U.S. is pretty much leading the charge on this, especially from a business standpoint. You also have some countries taking this a step further. Uruguay has actually legalized recreational marijuana at the federal level itself, so they became the first country to do that. But yeah, on the medical side, we have about half the states in the U.S. have legalized medical marijuana, and you got to think that there'll be some kind of bigger change at the federal level coming within the next 5 years.
As states craft laws legalizing marijuana for medical use, Walsh says the business end of the industry is huge, which is amazing since it's not yet a large corporate enterprise.
This is still really a mom-and-pop industry, but it's a massive industry now. According to our estimates, sales of medical and recreational marijuana in states where it's legal will hit about $4.3 billion just this year. And that has an economic impact that ripples throughout a community and a state. So this year we expect the economic impact of the industry will be up to $17 billion. And that includes all the money and jobs that this creates, not only in the marijuana industry, but when it revitalizes communities and then other companies hire to meet the demand of the workers and the people in this industry. So, you know, it has a massive economic impact, and it's only going to grow. I mean, we think that sales will be growing from, as I mentioned, about $4.3 billion this year to up to $11 billion in 2020. So this is becoming a major American industry.
As with most new industries, the more popular their product becomes, the more difficult it is to jump on the bandwagon. Walsh says that with government regulations and startup costs, getting into the game is becoming more and more expensive.
About 5 or 6 years ago, there weren't many regulations at the state level on this industry. So you basically had people opening marijuana cultivation facilities and dispensaries where you sell medical marijuana for, $10,000, $20,000. It was easier to start than a lot of other businesses. What you've seen recently, though, is that states are regulating the industry heavily now, and with that comes licensing fees, application fees, and a whole bunch of other costs tied to getting into compliance with these regulations. And the regulations cover everything from security to employee badging. In Colorado, for instance, employees have to get approved to work in the industry and update that annually. And then you have record-keeping regulations. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's become a lot more expensive recently.
Walsh says the industry is moving away from the mom-and-pop business model because of the cost and all of the red tape. But those hurdles don't deter the corporations, whose deep pockets and armies of lawyers are well-equipped to take on anything that comes their way.
The pharmaceutical companies, they are not involved yet because this is federally illegal. But you can bet that they are looking at this and will be poised to move if and when the federal government changes its position. So the point I'm trying to make is that the barriers to entry are increasing. It's becoming a lot more expensive to get involved, and it's moving away from mom and pop into more of a corporate industry as it grows. So to get involved now, you do have to have a lot of money, or you have to line up investors. It depends on the state and its regulations, but to open a marijuana grow facility or a dispensary, you could be talking maybe $50,000, $60,000 on the very low end, up to $1 million or more. A lot of states are now requiring that you have a couple $100,000 in escrow, and the licenses can cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 annually.
Just because corporate America has the resources to step in and create an even bigger legalized marijuana industry than we have now, that doesn't mean that the entrepreneurs of the nation will be frozen out. Walsh says that it takes a lot of work and a lot of people to make medical and legal recreational marijuana a reality. And that means opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses to get a piece of the pie.
There's a whole nother side to the industry most people don't think about that we call the ancillary side. And these are all the companies that provide services and products and technology to the businesses in the industry that touch the plant and to patients and consumers. So this ancillary side, think of it this way, all the services and products this industry needs can be legal, consulting, HR, HVAC services, construction, real estate, the list goes on and on. And that is an easier part of the industry to get involved in because you don't have to meet all these regulatory requirements.
One roadblock that even the largest corporations would have to negotiate is banking. Walsh says that there aren't many financial institutions now that will take money from legalized medical or recreational marijuana facilities, and that creates cash flow and security problems.
All of the major banks in the country have cut off the cannabis industry because it's federally illegal. They don't want to get in trouble with the U.S. government and lose their bank charter or jeopardize their main business. So you've seen the Wells Fargos and Chases of the country say, nope, we're not going to open up any cannabis-related accounts. That means that companies either have to find a smaller local bank or credit union that will work with them kind of as a one-off basis, or what you find is that most companies that touch marijuana don't have a bank account at all. So there are a lot of problems with that. You have a lot of cash on hand every day. How do you accept payment from customers? Well, a lot of them, you can't use credit cards because the credit card companies won't work with the industry either. So it's heavily cash-based, and that creates security concerns, robberies, even employee theft. And then you have just logistical and operational issues. I mean, how do you pay your vendors if you can't write them a corporate check? And how do you pay your employees? And how do you keep track of all that cash, and where do you put it?
Even with those problems, Walsh says that there haven't been a lot of robberies in these facilities because states require optimum security, such as wall-to-wall cameras and alarm systems. There are bigger concerns about legal, medical, and recreational marijuana than where to put the money, though. Walsh says that the industry is facing a knot of regulations from various states that can prove to be a challenge for patients.
The big concern on the medical side is dosing and potency and transparency in terms of what are people actually buying and ingesting. Was the marijuana made with pesticides? Patients need to know all that, and there's a lot of either lack of regulations on that or confusing regulations. So that's a concern on the medical side. On the recreational side, it's basically kind of the same thing. Do consumers know what they're buying? A lot of people aren't as familiar with marijuana in the recreational market. Maybe they did it in college, and then they grew up and got jobs and had families. And now that it's legal, they're going to try it again, but they don't know what they're getting. They don't know what they're capable of consuming in terms of potency.
There are questions over testing, dosage, how much THC, the chemical in marijuana that gets you high, should be in each product, and how that should be taxed. Walsh says, though, that the biggest question is, how do you keep recreational marijuana from falling into the hands of kids?
It goes back to alcohol, prescription drugs, anything else that is legal that you don't want kids to get their hands on. Guns. You have to package these things in a way that they're hard for kids to open and then keep it away from them in the household. And so that's where you see a lot of the fears about recreational. Is it going to get into the hands of kids? Are teenagers going to use it and become burnouts? And that's still a big question, I would say. But the industry is trying to prevent that. I mean, there's packaging now that adults can't even open. It's so difficult. So it remains to be seen how this all plays out.
With the movement across the country for legalizing marijuana for medical purposes and a slower one for recreational purposes, Walsh says it could become a commodity just like sugar and pork bellies. What next? Marijuana mutual funds and ETFs?
Absolutely. I would put money on that. I think that this is quickly becoming one of the next great American industries. And once the kind of federal barriers are removed, you will see giant venture capital firms get involved. Wall Street firms in terms of mutual funds and all that will come of age here once these federal barriers are removed. You haven't seen a lot of that so far because, again, marijuana is still federally illegal. But this is becoming a massive industry. And there's no doubt in my mind that in a couple of years, whether it's 5 years or 10 years when the federal government changes its tune, this is going to be just like any other industry out there. You're going to be able to invest in it at a high level. And there are already a lot of people investing in it and making money. And that will only increase as we go forward.
Walsh says that in those states where medical marijuana or recreational marijuana are legal, the stigma of the product is fading. And with 20 states putting the marijuana question on the ballot this November, It seems like that stigma may disappear altogether in the near future. Chris Walsh invites listeners to read up on the latest news about the efforts to legalize marijuana for medical and recreational purposes, as well as updates on regulations, market research, and conferences pertaining to legal marijuana in the Marijuana Business Daily at mjbizdaily.com. For more information about all of our guests, log on to our site at viewpointsonline.net. You can find archives of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price. Last week, we reported a story about the legal profession featuring Greg Bertram from Pacific ADR Consulting, and we mistakenly gave the wrong website for his firm. The correct web address is pacificadrconsulting.com. We apologize for the error.
No pet should ever go hungry. This May, during National Pet Month, Purina is teaming up with former pro quarterback Brady Quinn and his wife, Olympic gymnast Alicia Sacramone Quinn, to put an end to pet hunger with the Roll Over Hunger campaign. Simply upload a video or photo of you and your pet attempting to roll over to rolloverhunger.com and then share your video or photo on social media using hashtag #RollOverHunger. Through May 31st, for every valid video or photo uploaded to the website, Purina will donate $2 to the Pet Finder Foundation, up to $50,000, to help feed shelter pets in need. The Pet Finder Foundation helps shelters support pets until they find forever homes. To learn more about Roll Over Hunger and watch the National Pet Month PSA featuring the Quinns and their dogs Bella and Boss, visit rolloverhunger.com. You can also play an instant win game there for a chance to win Purina coupons. Get involved and challenge your friends. Join the Roll Over Hunger Challenge today and make a difference for our four-legged friends during National Pet Month.
Can you imagine not being able to see? Nearly 250 million people worldwide are blind or visually impaired. 80% of visual impairment can be prevented or cured, but 90% of those affected live in countries with little access to quality eye care. The solution is Orbis, a global nonprofit organization which has trained thousands of doctors and treats hundreds of thousands of patients in 78 countries aboard their Flying Eye Hospital, the world's only ophthalmic teaching hospital on board a DC-10 aircraft. This summer, Orbis will launch their brand new Flying Eye Hospital, an MD-10 state-of-the-art, fully accredited eye hospital with enhanced teaching technologies. Orbis invites you to celebrate this milestone in aviation and medicine. For just a $25 donation to Orbis, you can get a behind-the-scenes tour of the Flying Eye Hospital and experience a piece of aviation history this summer in Los Angeles, Memphis, New York, Washington, D.C., or Dallas. Visit orbis.org/launch to make your donation. Register for tours and to learn more. That's orbis.org/launch.
Dove Chocolate, produced by Mars Chocolate North America, is passionate about cocoa from bean to bar. That means the highest standards of quality when crafting Dove Chocolate, while also improving the livelihoods of cocoa farmers and their families. Now Dove Chocolate is partnering with CARE to help empower women in the cocoa communities of Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa, where Dove Chocolate is sourced. The partnership will set up village savings and loan associations, giving women a safe place to save money and access small loans, which will in turn improve yields and incomes. Research shows that when women have greater income, more is invested in family and community, extending benefits to the next generation of cocoa farmers and their families. The new CARE partnership is yet another effort by Mars Chocolate to improve the cocoa production process, with the goal to certify 100% of its cocoa as sustainably produced by 2020. It's all of this and more that makes Dove Chocolate a pleasure with purpose. Visit us at dovechocolatejourney.com to learn more.